Hello, folks. Dustin Zarni here, Democratic Elections Commissioner in Onondaga County, and welcome to my Commissioner in a Car. This is my weekly podcast show that I talk about things that are happening in the election world in New York and Onondaga County. And today we're talking about the presidential primary that is supposed to happen on April 2nd. The reason why I say supposed to happen is, well, there is a possibility it won't, but it's not likely. Let me run through it. So, the legislature last year chose April 2nd as our date for our presidential primary. And there was two ways to get on the primary for, and it's different, by the way, for both Republicans and Democrats. Both parties can petition to get on the primary. So a candidate goes out there and gets 15,000 signatures statewide, and they get on the presidential primary ballot for April 2nd to determine which of their delegates are going to the national convention for either the Democrat or Republican. However, the Republicans have a rule in their party that allows for nationally known candidates to get on the ballot. Which is basically a hall pass to get on the ballot for any candidate that's participating in debates and those things. So your Chris Christie's, your Vivek Ramaswamy's, your Nikki Haley's, your Donald Trump's, all of these people that have been standards of their party, they have filed nationally known certifications to get on the April 2nd primary in New York. So, but on the Democratic side, we've had three candidates choose the petition route to get on. That's President Joe Biden. He's president, but he still has to do petitions like everybody else. Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson. So all of these candidates are on the ballot as of this moment. But why do I say as of this moment? Well, a little known fact in New York is that there is a deadline where a candidate can then ask to be removed from the ballot. And that deadline is Tuesday, February 6th. Now, what does that mean? So let's say a candidate has decided they no longer want to run in the presidential primary. They can file a certificate with the New York State Board of Elections removing their name, and that would remove their name from the ballot. There's also an opportunity after that to file something saying that they're no longer running. However, their name will still appear on the ballots, and any votes cast under their name will be done as voids for the purpose of selecting electors. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it later on next month. But for now, we're going to focus on the February 6th deadline. Now, so what happens if all but one candidate removes their name from the ballot? Well, then there will not be a primary for that race. We saw that in 2020 when Donald Trump was running for re-election on the Republican side. He was the only candidate who got this nationally known thing, and no other candidate filed to run against him. There was no Republican primary. But also we saw in 2020 that many of the candidates that were on the New York ballot had dropped off later after this February deadline, and they still stayed on the ballot, and there was still a Democratic primary. In fact, it went to court because the elections commissioners in the New York State tried to, the Democratic State Board elections commissioners tried to remove that presidential ballot since every candidate had already dropped off but missed that deadline, and they wanted to have COVID as a reason not to have that election. And what happened was it got moved to the June primary, and the court put it back on because they said that we couldn't remove it after that February deadline. So that's kind of what's going on now this year. So today is the New Hampshire primary, and we'll see what happens later tonight. We'll see who wins that. Donald Trump, and we're going to talk about the Republican side first. Donald Trump is favored to win that, not just the nomination, but New Hampshire tonight. And there's many people who think that if he has a large enough showing tonight, that Nikki Haley may decide to drop off. And thus, that would mean that Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Chris Christie, Vivek Ramaswamy, all these people that were in the Republican primary a few weeks ago are now out of the primary. And many of them will file certificates to officially drop out of the New York primary. If that happens, and Donald Trump is the only candidate on that, and we won't know this till February 7th, so tune into my Commissioner in the Car late on February 6th, because that's a Tuesday. I'll be coming home from Albany that Tuesday. That's another story. But tune in then, and I will tell you what's going on with that. But if they do file to get off, then there will be no Republican primary. However, there most likely will be a Democratic primary, and let me explain why. So there's three candidates: Joe Biden, Marianne Williamson, and Dean Phillips, who have filed petitions. And there are two ways for these people to get taken off the ballot. The first way is through a petition challenge. And the second way is for them to file that they are off by February 6th as well. I think it's very highly unlikely that both Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson will declare that they're not going to be candidates come February 6th. They turned in a large number of petitions, so they have sweat equity in the game, so to speak, and I think it's very clear and very consistent that they are going to be candidates in this election going forward. So, now the only other way for them to get thrown off is through a petition challenge. Now, they filed their petitions on Friday. That means that we had till Monday for someone to do what's called a general objection on their petitions. That's the first objection, to say, hey, I'm planning on objecting to this later with specifics, but hold my objection, and you have to file that within 3 days. Now, it can be filed by postmark. So that objection could have been filed by postmark on January 22nd, which was Monday, and it has until tomorrow to arrive. As of tonight, there's been no objections filed on Marianne Williamson's or Dean Phillips' petitions. And with no objections filed, that means that they are going to be candidates on the ballot. Now, it could come in tomorrow. And in fact, the only objection that has been filed is an objection that was filed on Joe Biden's petition. It was postmarked on January 19th and it arrived today. That is a timely objection. Again, it's a general objection. I doubt it will lead to anything. Maybe just one person decided to do this, and if it doesn't really lead to specific objections, and I doubt it will, then obviously Joe Biden will be on the ballot. So the question is, will Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson, or both, take advantage of this February 6th deadline to drop out of the New York campaign? And I doubt that's likely. The New Hampshire primary that is going on today is also going on the Democratic side. However, it doesn't count. Joe Biden doesn't actually appear on the ballot anywhere because the DNC passed rules saying that South Carolina was going to be the first state to hold a primary this year. And New Hampshire decided to defy the DNC and hold their primary anyways. And a lot of people are going to get, nefarious DNC, blah, blah, blah. Well, I think it's actually kind of ridiculous that we have one state that always gets to be the first one to select president, and that's New Hampshire, a state that's very white and just not as diverse as the Democratic coalition. But that's a story for another podcast. But these were the rules that were set out last year, and New Hampshire had their choice, and they decided not to. Now, Dean Phillips is running in New Hampshire tonight, and he's on the ballot, but even if he wins, he'll get no delegates because no one gets delegates in New Hampshire. Joe Biden decided not to appear on the ballot because he's respecting the DNC's rules. I believe Marianne Williamson might be on the ballot as well. But there is a write-in campaign going on in New Hampshire for Joe Biden, organized by volunteers and maybe probably some campaign operatives as well, that are getting people to write in Joe Biden's name to show his support in the state. And there is some thought that the write-in is actually going to eclipse Dean in this ballot, and it would be so embarrassing that Mr. Phillips might decide to withdraw. So it's possible Mr. Phillips might withdraw by February 6th. However, if not, the next state, South Carolina, the only state that has delegates in the first one, that is not until the end of February. So there's about a month in between New Hampshire and South Carolina. It's going to be too late for them to drop out if they decide to go through with the South Carolina primary and continue on after that. So there is a very remote chance that we won't have an April 2nd primary. There is a decent chance that we won't have a Republican presidential primary. But I think there's a very, 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 very little chance that we won't have a Democratic primary. So thus, we will probably have a primary on April 2nd. We at boards of elections across the state are preparing to have a primary on April 2nd. We've already started notifying polling places and doing the work that we have to do to get ready for this April 2nd primary, and we plan on having it. But we will know more on February 6th. So tune in 2 weeks, and I'll let you know what the verdict is. Are we going to have a primary or not? Are we going to have a primary on the Republican and Democratic side, or just one, or neither? And so February 6th is when we're going to really learn that date is certain. So hopefully we'll know, and I'll be able to tell you. So even if somebody drops off after February 6th, it's too late. We will still have a primary. It may be the lowest turnout primary you've ever seen, but it will still happen. And we at the board still have to go through and open up everything for that primary. So that's all I got for today's Commissioner in the Car. I am planning on getting back on track this week after my long vacation and getting sick and travels. I'm now back into a normal work mode. This Thursday, I will do my long-awaited Zoom with Zarni with Susan Lerner of Common Cause. And then this weekend, I will be doing a weekly look back at 2023, and then moving on to the new year here after that. Please take a look at DustinZarni.com. I put up there legislative items that are legislative priorities for the Democratic Caucus of New York State Elections Commissioners, and many of those priorities are shared by the Republican caucus as well. So check that out. I put that up there. That's what we're planning on asking legislators for. If you agree with that, contact your New York State legislature and ask them to enact some of these proposals that will make it easier to hold elections in New York. Check that out at DustinZarni.com. Starting in February, I'll be going to Albany a couple of days to just try to push that. I do these informational days as in my role as Democratic Caucus Chair. And I think that, they're informative on both sides of what we can and cannot do in elections in New York. So I'm happy to do it. But it's going to be a shortened schedule this year because of the April 2nd primary that I just talked about earlier in this podcast. Thank you very much. This has been my pleasure bringing Commissioner in Car to you. And I'll see you around. Go to DustinZarni.com to subscribe. As always, for free. I never have ads. I never take outside money for it. I pay for it myself. It's part of my educational outreach to Onondaga County. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. It's not letting me go.